Welcome to the Executive Outlook. Today, we are joined by two leaders from TalkTalk. Kevin, who is leading the Director and Chief Data and AI Officer in TalkTalk, and Shruthi, who is a Head of Data Engineering and Operations. Together, they lead the teams that turn strategy into the working system, from cloud platforms and data pipelines to governance, delivery, and real-time business outcomes. Welcome, Kevin and Shruthi.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Isha.
All right. So I'm very excited to hear your journey and about your roles and responsibilities in TalkTalk.
So I've been here for 4 months, and what I'm doing here is what we're going to be talking about. So how can we set the data foundations, right? And then how can we leverage and springboard from those in order to accelerate business value, including P&L and customer satisfaction, which are at the heart of every organization. But before doing that, and in order to move at pace without incurring a mountain of tech debt, the foundations needs to be set in a robust and effective manner. And I know you want to talk about cloud migration. It's in the public domain that we are in the process of migrating from one platform to another, and we can share some of the views in here. In terms of where I came before, so I have got a mixed background. So I worked also at the financial regulator that helped me to understand the risk side. So not only to deliver value and deliver outputs, but also what are the risk mitigations that we need to bring to the table. So that view about the risk side as well as the business element when I was at AXA before joining here and other organization. The holistic view about the P&L drivers, the profitability, but equally while moving at pace while mitigating the risk really helps.
Amazing. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing it. Yes, Shruti, would love to hear.
Hi. So I've been with TalkTalk for almost 2 years now, currently head of data engineering and ops. I basically look at the actual data platform and the pipelines and the data governance and data quality side of things, what we have today. So I've already been part of one of the migrations where we took away from the legacy platform that we had as a data warehouse towards an Azure-based Synapse data warehouse. And this is the second migration that I'm part of, where we're going from CRM to CRM, as Kevin mentioned. The focus has been in terms of how do we get the foundations in place, how do we get the governance in place, while we also migrate our customers over to the new platform with as minimal disruption as possible is how we are trying to head to. So I'm literally responsible for the entire engineering function, along with even the data ops and platform ops side of things that I would be looking at. In terms of my background as such, it's quite varied. I started off as a software engineer, to be honest, but throughout, it's been like one thing I realized about myself is I was always a problem solver, very keen on problem solving, and I always empowered the problem solving mindset with data-driven decisions. And the more and more I did that, more and more I realized my love for data. And that is the way I moved from software engineering towards data engineering, and now have been a data professional for more than 14 years now, specifically. In terms of the previous organizations I've been working on, my focus has always been in terms of progressing. How do we improve the estate when it comes to people, process, and tech, while ensuring we are continuing the business outcome deliveries and keeping the focus on business continuity, getting the commercial goals? That's my key approach. And probably the other thing that I would want to say is learning as I go with every role and growing to adapt and to learn into the new roles that I get into has been my key driver to get to where I am today, and probably where I would want to get to somewhere else. It's always what I can learn more has been my true driver.
Thanks for sharing that, Shruti. That's an exciting journey for sure. So I want to ask, like you mentioned about the cloud migrations, right? So many companies think of doing the modernization to move the legacy platforms into the new platforms. But what are the real struggles that they face to make it real? So do you want to share some instances that how you planned and how you make sure the migration are happening in the way that business wants?
I lived through migrations, not just here, which is live and up and coming as we're talking about, but even at our organization where we still had to operate and we had to migrate from legacy systems to a new system. So I experienced that firsthand in multiple organizations. Some key lessons learned, which we had to navigate later on, is what are the KPIs that you set yourself in terms of success? Well, how do you frame what success look like? Is it just about migrating the data, or are other KPIs in terms of performance performance, reliability, security, operability, cost, data quality, data lineage, data mapping, data ownership, and the list, we can go into it in more detail. So how do you set that vision? And then how do you plan in order to do your migration, taking in consideration the end-to-end, not just lift and shift the data, that's just one part of the aspect, but also equally well, how do you keep the holistic view in place? Another aspect which a lesson learned from the past is stress testing the solution. So how can you use real life scenarios to stress test as you're going along and bake in time to that scenario testing to understand where are the pain points, what are the weak linkages, and how can I fix them before pushing things in production, because then at that point it'd be a little bit maybe more challenging to do so. So those are the three aspects. Get the data foundations before you migrate, which I haven't touched upon. We can delve into detail. So if you have the data on weak foundations, then you're going to resurface this as you go along. So make sure that before you start, you get the data foundations as robust as you can possibly can. Then plan accordingly and be methodical about the plan, get the right key performance indicator, and equally well bake in stress test scenario, modeling scenarios, etc.
And Shruti, do you want to share some insights over there?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. So a kind of segue from what Kevin said in a kind of a bigger picture as well as to a granular picture. From a technical aspect, what I usually see is any cloud migration is looked at as a tool adoption or a platform adoption, as if it's very technical. But what it actually is a cultural change. People are and processes are at the heart of it. So getting the foundations right, as Kevin very aptly put it, is absolutely essential, and establishing that importance of foundations with people, making them understand and bring us along with our journey of migration, where they would be the part of providing us the KPI, making sure that is what the key performance indicators that they want to look at, that is the business outcome that they want to look at, that they want to achieve. They don't look at the migration as just another platform being moved, but looking at it like, this is what I'm getting out of this platform, this is what I'm going to get out of that platform, giving it to us, giving those parameters to us to ensure that our foundations are aligned to those business outcomes throughout the journey is what is key. So I would completely agree with what Kevin said in all three. It is key that the people and their processes drive with us, work along with us to establish those foundations, to reaffirm those key performance indicators and test and evaluate with us to make sure that the migration is successful.
So how do you do the culture change? So adoption of tool is okay, we will be migrating all the data, we will be migrating the processes. But what do you think, as per your experience, what culture changes take?
Yeah. I can take a first pass at that. It's something, again, that I lived through and continue to live through it. So culture needs to be endorsed from the top, and that education piece. There's a couple of different aspects in here. So we are talking about a federated approach. So let's empower the business. It's okay to give them a self-serve business. And as we are moving into agentic AI, the need for organizations to empower that federated model is becoming clearer and clearer. But with great responsibilities. So with great powers come great responsibilities. So how can we make sure that we educate the stakeholders as to what is it, what are the responsibilities? We enable you to use these, but we need to educate stakeholders. We also need to be clear about the responsibilities. If they are using the data and they are becoming a data consumer, data belongs to the organization, not just the data team or the tech team. It's an organization wide. So that data set needs to be also looked after and maintained by the whole organization. So that's when we start to look about data owners and data stewards and what are the roles and responsibilities that different players and stakeholders live to that. So be clear about the education. Be clear about the roles and responsibilities, but equally be clear that we are here to help you. So we're not just like leaving you on your own. We set best practice. We show you how it's done. We help you to upskill. We set the right framework in place, but also we're here to help you in making sure that we adhere to the best practices.
Okay.
Thanks, Kevin. Again, following up from what Kevin said, at the implementation level, we usually find it hard if we don't have a sponsorship right up from top. So from Kevin's world, where he does get the buy-ins, the way to put it as, from the senior stakeholders, the education literacy, the trust that the excos would build, the senior leadership would build, and then that will follow through to the rest of the team. So the cultural change cannot happen at one level, but it has to start from the top down, because we are used to that mindset, right from the beginning, when we start with our parents telling us what to do, and we literally adhere to that. When we know that our leaders are convinced about what we are trying to deliver, as implementers, as the people delivering value, we would be convinced as well to go through with that. So with the education that Kevin said, would be following up from the stakeholders, the roles and responsibilities defined, accountability is defined. If we just need to cascade down to the implementation level, saying that you're not doing everything in the world, you're focusing it to what your stakeholders deliverables is, the roles and responsibilities defined by them. So it's not a one day change, or it's not going to be a 1 month change. It's a constant ongoing attempt, both at the senior executive level and at the senior leadership level, to bring the entire team with you. That would be probably my take.
Yep, absolutely agreed. Thanks for sharing that. So next I want to hear from you guys about case study where you have solved a big problem and which has created a result in the form of either for customer or for business. So you can share any instance around those areas.
So if I use an example, because when you do the data migration, or there's a topic of that's an enabler, then how do you use those data assets or data features in order to deliver value? And that will come further down the stream. So if I give you an example from very recently, where the team that I was working in a different organization had a mandate to obviously increase the profitability, but that's why we're in business, but equally well to improve the customer satisfaction. And this was related to the health sector. So work together in order to use the data that we have and triage which are the customers that need the most support. When unfortunately, when people fall ill, some might need a bit more support than others. It's the nature of how illness unfortunately work. And providing this dedicated support to customers, dedicating more specialized medical resources. Unfortunately, those resources are limited, are very finite and very cost intensive. So then we use the data and the data teams together with the business. They developed data products that identify who are the customers that need the most support. And the benefit from that piece of work was both a P&L reduction, so we could use the resources, the finite cost and expensive resources, more effectively and efficiently, but equally well, we managed to decrease the length of time that people were ill, and we helped them to improve and become better sooner and faster. So it's a win-win situation, both from an organization, we managed to reduce the cost, but equally well for the customers, we helped them and assisted them to become healthier quicker. So I think no one wants to be sick. There was a very good example where the data teams work with the business in order to deliver value.
Absolutely.
Jumping into mine, probably I'll pick one of the best, seriously, I would say. It was a data centralization, global unification, to be honest. Unilever, you might already be aware of. So Unilever Food Solutions have their markets across 75 plus countries. Their data was disparate. Each market was managing its own local data. They had their own order management, their own inventory, and their own sales information, which was not collated. And as a result, the marketing team, they were literally giving out product propositions, which was not really customer centric. The leadership had no cross-country visibility in terms of how the product performance is and what are the better customer market, etc., etc. So without going into the details, one of the best case study that I literally did, my team, literally we worked to come up with a common global data model that would work across. There were concerns about each local markets where they were worried about loss of control over their data. The governance coming in at the common global level that would actually impact their accountability and responsibility for how they drive it. So as the approach that we took is the global data model would only look at how they collaborate together and bring it together into a centralized data lake, whereas the local accountability is maintained, the local control is maintained, and their metrics are also followed into. And the way we were able to prove is by coming up with quicker dashboards, quick wins really, some cross-country dashboards that would show this is what the product performance is across. Marketing team were able to identify, this product works better in this kind of customer base, so can we replicate it in this market? So each countries who were having resistance in the beginning, they also benefited. The centralized leadership team benefited because they were able to see cross-country insights, and the customers also benefited because they were getting product propositions which were specific to their requirement based on cross-country market insights. That would be one of the things I would want to quote.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And how much time it has took to consolidate 75 countries data into a global model?
To be honest, I wasn't there for the entire 75 countries because it's going to take quite a lot. I was there with them for a year and a half. And within that period, we managed to do around 28 countries. Because please remember, it's literally across EMEA, LATAM, APAC. So different zones, different time zones, different languages. So even bringing them together into a global data model itself is a challenge. So almost within a year, we were able to turn around 27 plus countries. They did continue with the migration. I know they did continue with the centralization even after I left. But I was there when we initiated it and we put the framework and standards together.
So, what are your thoughts on the post migration activities, and what validation mindset should we have after we do all the cloud migration or platform migration?
About setting the right metrics from the start. So, what are the expectations? And these fall under broad category. So, how about we measure the performance, but also the reliability, security, operability, and costability. And we also need to look at this across the whole stack. So, across the infrastructure, the platform services, the application layer, the operation layer. So, it's not just like one sector, but we need to look across the whole piece. Also, post-migration, before pressing the go-live button, as I alluded to, we need to have scenarios that mirror real-life scenarios. So chaos engineering, fault injection, load stress testing, disaster recovery and resolution plan, etc. So how can we implement these scenarios in order to try to break the system and make sure that it stands true. In terms of the metrics, you made reference to some metrics in there. I touched upon various categories. So reliability metrics, we can look at error rate below X%, P95 and P99 latency targets, auto scaling and response time. And in terms of performance, we can look at throughput thresholds, resource saturation level. In terms of resiliency, we can look at RTO, RPO validation versus DR test, etc. So there's quite a few broad range of metrics that people can look at. But the message is that we need to look at the whole end-to-end, and we need to look at a multidimensional spectrum. And let's make sure that we test before we go live to make sure that we are as ready as we can. Inevitably, some elements there are unknown which will crop up, but let's limit those unknowns as much as we possibly can.
Just a very quick follow-up from there, really, because Kevin covered most of the details that we need to be looking at. So those are like the requirements for the implementation team, for the delivery team, in terms of what all needs to be there. So where I would say in terms of the post-validation checks or post-validation activity, we should have monitoring in place where the data observability can be looked at in detail and can be monitored on a day-to-day basis. Our reaction to that, our response time, we should have teams in place who should be able to respond within that parameter to ensure all those details, which Kevin had said that these are all the metrics, these are all the things that we want to be monitoring, and we should be alerting on faults or any remedial actions that we need to be taking. So putting that SLA around, the processes around, the people in place, and also making sure that there are enough dashboards, enough tools that we are looking at where the visibility of the data and the process in itself is there for them to make a decision.
So monitoring is very essential, because if the issues will gonna come, so we will be able to identify it before it becomes a bigger thing, and decisions will be right. This is more onto a data operations side of it. That should be the first priority, to set up the data operations.
I guess just to jump in there, it is also key that the requirement should be there. So like Kevin listed everything that needs to be monitored. If there is no visibility of that, if there is no clarity on that, ops can do nothing much. So the ops team would need guidance and steer in terms of what is it that we are monitoring, what is it that we are reacting to. So without that, that's quite key, because people will miss when they say data ops, oh, they will manage it. No, it has to be defined and given steer by the business that we will take towards.
All right. Okay. So if we have to start from scratch and we have to set up the AI governance within the company, or you can say data governance. Let's start with the data governance and then we'll go with the AI governance. So what will be your first 3 steps that you will gonna take in order to make sure the systems are set up?
We can talk from experience about this as well, because being here for a very limited period of time, yet how I looked into this. The first aspect is we need to get the right governance committee structure. So how we get to Shruthi's point previously, how do we get the people at the right level? So not just at the XCOM level that set the guardrails and the framework, but equally the doers. So how do we set up the right appropriate governance committees, subcommittees, etc., without creating unnecessary burden? So this is the first one, get the right framework in place. The second one, as I mentioned, about get the right guardrails and framework. So what about the policies and procedures? So those will help you to set up what is the framework that we need to operate within. And then from that, you start to translate it into playbooks so that people can understand this is the high level framework. This is what it means in real life. So get those in place. And equally, we alluded to do this, influence the culture. So that will be the biggest showstopper. So how can we influence the culture from the top down and set up that this is a collective, data belongs to everyone. So this is a collective organization, cross-organization piece of work that we need to do. AI governance doesn't just sit within their compliance or the first line of defense or any other line of defense. It is a collective agreement. So how can we empower people to know what are their roles and responsibilities, equip them to make the right decisions and take the right actions, and equally provide them the right infrastructure and support to escalate when they need help, and when things don't go as planned, let's work together and remediate them. So those were my top 3 things.
To be honest, basically Kevin covered everything. So pretty much having the right structure, right accountability, and right responsibilities across would be the key to setting up everything, because without that, no matter what we set up, it's going to fall off. That would probably, just supporting to Kevin comments.
And Kevin, how much time does it take in order to set up the governance process?
So it depends on how long is a piece of string and where do you start from scratch. If you are starting from a blank canvas, it depends on the skill set of the people that you have. So obviously there's not a one person store. You need to leverage the expertise to help you draft the policies. If you think about the governance, it's not just one policy. You can have one mega policy, but there are quite a few subsections to it. So the point that I'm trying to say is it depends on the skill set that you have. It depends on which part of the organizations you have came from, and it also depends on the maturity. So that's ultimately will be the determinant factor. What is the maturity level of the organization?
What do you want to share with the companies that they should not do in order to prevent themselves?
So get the foundations right. Everyone talks about getting organizations AI ready, which focus predominantly on 5 pillars. But in terms of what is essentials, get the foundations right. And that's across the whole piece, not just the governance, the process and procedure, but also have you got the right skill set? Have you got the right infrastructure? Have you got the right operating model? Have you got the right business model? So get the foundations right and don't cut corners on those, because if you do, then that will come back to bite you at some point in your journey. So get the foundations right. Absolutely invest in getting the foundations right.
So foundations, absolutely key critical, but also the understanding that foundations are not just a technical team's job. It is top down across the business. Everybody is equally accountable and responsible for getting the foundations right. That understanding has to be there across the organization who's venturing onto a journey for migrations or transformations.
I want to ask a rapid fire about your preference. What is your favorite platform, AWS or Azure?
I worked on both. I've got no preferences. So as long as the team, they can both, there are nuances between the two. There is equal support between the two. There are different costs between the two. So it all comes up with how the organization is set up.
All right. And Shruthi, your preference?
Again, I would say it's not a preference that I don't think there should be a preference on any tool or platform. It should be driven by your business outcomes, your strategies, your current technical limitations, etc. So I don't think there should be any preference on any platform. Whichever delivers the best outcome that we need should be the platform that we are picking.
All right. If I talk about the visualization, Power BI or Tableau?
Yeah, so again, the difference between the two is that Power BI, you've got access to the broader Power Suite, while Tableau is a niche. There is a considerable price difference between the two, between Tableau and Power BI. Again, it all depends on the organization. So from a visualization perspective, they're all easy to explain. And I manage teams that use Tableau, I manage teams that use Power BI, and I manage teams that use both of them. There's no right or wrong reason, but again, this is a trade-off conversation, which way the organization is going to go. If they're AWS enabled and not Microsoft enabled, then they might want to lean one way versus the other. And again, so it all depends on the specific organization rather than is it this or is it the other one.
On premises or cloud?
Again, it comes to, we are seeing organizations that are moving away from cloud and putting back on premises because of the cost they can structure. It doesn't mean that if you're on-prem, the costs are not high. But when you have big data and you want to start to scale up, then when you're on cloud, there could be some factors playing up in there. So again, it all depends on the security aspect, the amount of investment that organizations want to do, the amount of the cold versus hot data that they want to store, etc. So it is a business by business case scenario. It's not one size fits all. We are, as I mentioned, as an industry, we are seeing some reverse. Everyone was very quick to move on to the cloud. Now we're seeing some instances where we are seeing the reverse of that. And that's because businesses are reevaluating what does it that mean for them, what are the cost benefit analysis, what are the trade-offs that they need to make.
So if the business is in starting area, they are setting up the data warehouse for their organization. So in that scenario, what will be the first preference for them?
Yeah, it depends on how much skills they have. So setting up your own infrastructure, you need to have quite a lot of skills available to you. Do you have those skills, and where do you want to go? What I suggest is don't look the now and tomorrow, but look into a long-term horizon, because migrating from on-prem to cloud or vice versa, that's quite a big shift in there that needs to be done. So what I suggest is get someone that can help you with formulating your 3 and 5 year plan. I appreciate that as a startup, cash flows might be a big consideration, but equally while you heard us talk about the people, this requires quite a lot of high-skilled people, architects, engineers. So make sure that you got the right skill set, the right people, the right capacity that can serve you not just for tomorrow, but for the next 5 years at a minimum. And then that you make the decision from there.
I agree with Kevin. It is not something that we should be looking at like, oh, what do we need? And it's also the other way around. Sometimes in the name of scalability, I've seen people just putting too many resources in there, building too much of a big system when they don't need it, because in terms of the projection. So more a realistic expectations of this is what we have. These are our skill set. This is our data. This is what we're trying to do now. This is what we're trying to do in the future, near future, in the far future, and build and scale up. The best part about whether it is on-prem or cloud, or it allows you to top up. It allows you to scale as you want. So being mindful of what my roadmap would look like when you're trying to set up, what my current requirement is, and not to do any underkill or overkill while you're setting up data warehouse is quite key. What is the problem you're trying to resolve with the data warehouse is the key question.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your insights, and leadership first perspective on data and transformation. It's a pleasure having you both on the executive outreach.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Isha, for having us, and it was good meeting you.